Michael Phelps, he's a champion in swimming. I can't imagine that he is saying like, okay, I got gold medal, now I'm good. I don't need to train anymore. I just go to every competition and get the gold. That's not the case. So the people who strive for success, they need to be always ready. They need to be always sharp. They always want to make people more around them more engaged and more supportive. They just want more from life in general.
San Diego 911 emergency. You need to come right away. There's a man with a gun and it's loaded. Receiving emergency signal from 4 George 1141. We got a white female down. We need paramedics code please. All available units roll code that way.
Welcome to the De-Escalation Conversations podcast, and we're lucky today. I have a man that I've known for many years who has become a friend. His name is Vladimir Bushin, and Vladimir has over 20 years of experience working in a corporate environment with small and large groups. He's an expert in building an agile culture and improving organizational performance. Vladimir dedicated 8 years to learning and practicing Scrum, that's SCRUM, values and principles, and helping others succeed. He's a founder and active facilitator in a community of over 400 practitioners, improving communication and leadership skills. And he's been doing this for almost 3 years. He's excited to help professionals from a variety of different areas, including Scrum masters, managers, and senior leaders, and interested in helping them grow their influencing skills while improving organizational culture. Vladimir is a certified crucial conversations trainer and helps companies build an accountability culture that improves performance and quality while making work more enjoyable, sustainable, and inclusive. And while Vladimir is not in the normal area of work of law enforcement, K through 12 schools, fire, and medical services, the reason I wanted him on this podcast is because, well, number one, he's an amazing guy. Number two, he brings in organizational help that I don't care where you work, whether it's in public service, as a first responder, or in the corporate world, he's going to be able to help you. And I have so much respect for him. So, Vladimir, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Gary. That's a wonderful introduction. You are so kind. I appreciate that. And happy to be here.
Well, I happened to meet you, and we'll talk more about this a little bit later on during this episode, but I met you through the negotiation practice community. And so I'm going to plant this little seed in the back of your head to make sure that we talk about how people can find that community and some benefits about it. I know that for me, it's been a huge help over the years that I've been a member of that community. As I said a minute ago, over 400 people in that community, and every day, there isn't a day that goes by that you can't find someone to help you with a question. And usually a bunch of people will chime in and be able to help you with your questions and concerns, give you practice if you have a meeting that's coming up where you need to develop some skills, or if you just want to do some development, either on the personal or professional level. So we'll talk more about, I call it NPC, negotiation practice community, a little bit later. But what I'd like to do is start off, and I always ask my guests this: when you hear the term de-escalation, how do you define that? How do you look at that term? And that way our listeners get an idea of your lens that you're looking at that through.
That's a good question, Carrie. Obviously, you're an expert in de-escalation. I'm a more generic a professional, building culture, which not only engage in de-escalation or conflict situation. But I would say conflict and you know this dealing with difficult people and difficult situation is what determines the healthy culture. So it doesn't mean that there is no challenges in a teamwork, or no, every interaction is easy. I would say that it's effective for a team or just between people to challenge each other and demand more responsibility, demand more accountability, and point out to what needs to be improved. At the same time, it needs to be done in a way that would be well received, and it has to be well received, and it has to be useful, because useless communication, the communication that hurts the relationship, that moves people in the opposite direction from being collaborative to being opposing each other, is that what we can call escalation, when instead of building bridges we burn bridges, if instead of building dialogue we are building whether silence or violence. And what I mean by that is that if some feelings involved in the conversation, people may feel shy and they withdraw themselves from the dialogue, or on the opposite, some of the personality may kick in and people start to push each other and compel each other into compliance, and that will be a violence. So in either way, the communication will suffer, and sometimes it's hard to notice that. But ultimately, what we're talking about is de-escalation is ability to build a dialogue, build collaboration, get people into collaborative state when they can think and they are not clouded by host of emotions or bad emotions. And also ability to get people contribute to the dialogue, put everything on the table, put their thoughts, put their experiences, put their emotions as well, and put themselves there to the dialogue, whatever it is, in order to find the balanced solution. So I would say like the skill of doing that is maybe, if not called de-escalation, but very related to de-escalation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you talk about putting people in the right mindset, the frame of mind to be able to perform well. And I absolutely 100% agree with building bridges instead of burning them. And sometimes we don't just burn them, we drop this nuclear bomb right on top of the bridge and destroy it. And I've seen that happen when people didn't mean to do it, but because they weren't paying attention to how they communicated, that's exactly what did happen. So let me ask you this. There's a lot of times that you're talking about this, being able to communicate with people, being able to build bridges, being able to have effective communication. What are some of the tools that you've found to be effective? And I'm most interested in the tools that you've created and you've kind of curated together.
Well, in order to create a tool, let me start from something else here, from an example. So we all have life experience, and when we were children, we actually wanted to get something, and we wanted to do something, and we had to negotiate with others, and we had to persuade our others and create the dialogue and make agreement with others. So we kind of in that science or practice for all our lives. The only thing is that who are our teachers? When we are young, we pick up those tools and tactics from our parents, from our friends, from the teachers, from whoever we see, whoever we influenced by. And oftentimes when we do that, we pick it up from people who are not really kind of like educated well about negotiation and influence. So people kind of have their own understanding of that, and most of the time, people try to leverage something, and they try to leverage typically whether silence or violence. So essentially, when the child cries, it's a compelling argument towards making parents to do what the child wants, and sometimes it works, and with some parents it doesn't. And then as children we learn different tactics to get what we want. So what that means, we all have our tools. We all do. We all have our tool sets to do things. And when we say like, what tools do you invented? I would say every person may tell us that or teach us a dozen of things that they have in their tool set to get what they want. And the question here is, which of the tools are more effective in the long run? Because if you are sacrificing your relationships, if you burn bridges, and you started to you withdraw yourself from interaction, you started to think that the relationship doesn't bring you what you want, and you start to be not happy about what you're getting from people, and at the same time you're not telling anyone about this. So essentially you're hurting yourself and you're withdrawing, and then you try to show other people. It's also a leverage. You try to show our people how miserable their life will be without your help. Or maybe you're just quietly sitting there and waiting for them to fail without your help, without your advice, without your expertise. So that tactic of leverage is something that could be very effective in the short run, very effective. But in the long run, it will bring more damage than benefit. And it's called toxic relationships sometimes. So from this perspective, when you talk about the tools that I find successful and what I created, I would say that I learned a lot from my fellow practitioners, from famous negotiators, from the videos I watched, from the classes I took, and from the training I took as well. And I would say that there are a number of things that I picked up from them that I will find effective. For example, hotline listening is a great way to raise your awareness. And there's nothing better than at least understanding what people are going through. And in most cases, we don't have time to notice. And in most cases, we not get used to notice what people think, what they're going through, and what they are trying to tell us without saying it. And sometimes we may see it, but we don't understand what it means. So for example, what if somebody is saying, I'm trying to do the best in that particular area, right? What does it mean when a person saying I'm trying? You may guess, and maybe you will actually hit the bullseye, and maybe you will be off, and maybe you even understand what it means, but then you don't know what to do with that. You don't know how to what kind of um, what kind of action it demands, and how that information fits in a context, that information that was not articulated, and something that was not demanded from you explicitly, but you just see something is happening and you don't know what to do with that. So I would say that hotline listening skill is a great way to explore that, the exploration tool. Also, I use crucial conversations a lot. I use it every day. I use the mindset of it and the tools, like simplest tools of that, and as well as tools from Start with No and Never Split the Difference. So there are two great books. One is from Jim Camp's system, another from Chris Voss system. And I always learn more. Some of the things that I invented for myself, such a simple tool, for example, is the apology framework. So I'm not perfect. I make my mistakes, and sometimes I need to apologize. Knowing when to apologize is important, but also it is important to apologize the right way. And there are many bad ways to apologize. So I describe my apology framework on my website on my blog, humblenegotiator.com. So that's kind of to give you a perspective about different tools and some of which I use.
That's awesome. So we'll definitely put those links in our show notes for things like the negotiation practice community and the website you just mentioned. So let me ask you this. Chris Voss, the retired lead hostage negotiator for the international hostage negotiation team for the FBI, the author of Never Split the Difference, one of the books that you referenced, talks about tactical empathy. You use a phrase or a term called tactical curiosity. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so well, tactical empathy is Chris Voss's terminology. It is his intellectual property. He is developing that concept of being empathetic. I think that is important, but I don't think that is simple enough to grasp right away. What tactical curiosity is about, and this is where I kind of don't want to step on Chris Voss's toes, so to speak, and kind of go in parallel and kind of try to develop that concept of negotiation. So as Chris Voss described that people, and not only him, but people could be in different emotional state, but when they are in a state of curiosity, they really cannot be angry or frustrated, or could be in a bad mood. So curiosity seems to be an ultimate state of a negotiator, because in this state you're kind of using the full brain, you're exploring, and you're not being affected by amygdala. You're not being affected by kind of letting some chemicals in your blood that would just switch parts of your brain and don't allow you to think. So you always, as a negotiator, as an influencer, you always want to be aware, fully aware of the situation, and what different options could be explored. So you need your full brain to do that. And curiosity from this perspective is a best state to be. Talking about tactical curiosity is like, how do you use curiosity in order to explore? And in addition to what Chris Voss is teaching, and he is a wonderful teacher, and he is a great marketer as well. Many of the things that he's talking about, they're not difficult. It's rather simple, but he has really a great ability to explain things. So now, one thing that he is talking about is the word why and the question why, and he's saying that this question why could be risky because it may bring defensiveness to the other side. And when you trigger that defensiveness, it's very hard to get back. And what I would like to state is it's not always that risky. It's only a matter of how do you frame it in a way so you can use the word why, you can use the why question. But the other questions like what and how, they are leading in a way because you're providing context of the next step to the person who you're asking about things. So for example, you can say, how do you achieve the goals? So you're implying that somebody achieving the goals. Or you kind of assuming something and you're leading people to think in a certain way. Versus why question is the most open-ended questions of all. It doesn't imply anything. The only purpose of the question why is to go deeper and I get to know about the reason for things to happen. And that reason could be everywhere. You don't provide any context. That's why children like to ask a question why so many times, because they want to learn and explore. It's the best way to learn and explore. It's the most curious question, I would say. And we can all use it for our purposes without triggering defensiveness. We just need to know how.
Yeah, so using the word why with caution is important. And so it's so interesting that you talk about tactical curiosity, because one of our foundational principles at the IDEA, International De-Escalation Association, is that your brain is only in one of two states. It's either in executive state or it's in survival state. And curious, you can't be in survival state and be curious at the same time. Your brain won't allow it. You talked about anger and defensiveness. You can't, those are survival state emotions. And you can't experience those and be curious at the same time. 100% agree with you. It's amazing how our brain works. It's like a teeter-totter on a children's playground. Executive state, survival state. Can't be in both states at the same time. You can be transitioning, but you're not in both states at the same time. And that whole concept of curiosity is an executive state function. And since you can't be in survival state and executive state at the same time, if you're in curiosity, you cannot be in anger, frustration, overwhelm, and be curious. Your brain, I just hit my microphone. Your brain will not allow that to happen. And so I love how you describe that. That's absolutely beautiful. So the other tool that we teach, just for our listeners hearing this probably almost every episode, is gratitude. You cannot be in gratitude and anger, fear, frustration, overwhelm, all those negative emotions at the same time, because gratitude is also an executive state emotion. So let me do this. Let me ask you another question. Agile Culture coach. What is that? Tell me about it.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, and it's something that commonly misunderstood. What's the difference between agile culture and, well, traditional culture of a corporate organization, traditional corporate culture? So I think the difference in positioning that agile culture, positioning agile as a culture of high performance, which is achieved through um, interaction between people who are empowered to make decisions and make agreements between each other, and experiencing a higher level of autonomy. So essentially, in order to build a culture like that, it requires to, first of all, delegate a lot of information to people who are developing product, and that requires certain delegation of powers. That's why we're talking about empowering. So that being said, in a traditional organization, there's a hierarchy of powers, and there is a certain rights and responsibility on every level. And agile promoting delegation of that power towards the people who are actually doing the product, and have less decision makers in the hierarchy, essentially having less or no hierarchy at all. And what it requires a higher level of responsibility and accountability and interpersonal skills in the teams that are creating the product. So understanding human dynamics in terms of creating an environment when people can be vulnerable without being afraid of saying that they're struggling, saying that they need help, asking for help, maybe just providing their opinions could be risky. Just articulating your point of view could be risky. And people need to have the psychological safety. And a psychological safety, maybe it's a beaten word by now, but um, I would say it is directly related to de-escalation and directly related to how people feel about saying things. So also it takes people to understand the basics of the empathetic communication and empathetic human interaction. Each of us has a world of experience with our stories, our assumptions, our values and principles, and set of identities. And people need to understand how to learn about each other to make better agreements and better able to resolve issues. So if we are seeing something that we don't like, the first reaction is to go fight it. But it's not the most effective way of doing that, unless not in the long run. So, but the thing is, in many cases, managers do not address interpersonal issues at all, and instead they're observing how people tolerate difficult people. It's ineffective, because the effectiveness of organization is directly related to the time between the issue occurred and it is resolved. And if the issue occurs multiple times, it becomes a pattern, and then the whole organization start to reorient toward that issue to be kind of like tolerated and contained, and everybody adjusts to accommodate the issue, then organization loses effectiveness, loses time, and loses ability to raise difficult questions. And from this perspective, building effective agile culture means being able to address interpersonal issues and also train people how to address interpersonal issues themselves without manager to step in and do that. So
Wow.
it's kind of like in a nutshell. Yeah.
That's awesome. And what I'm also hearing you say is that this at a very base level requires trust to be able to do all this. Am I right in that?
Absolutely. Essentially, trust is a combination of two things. One, it is alignment of purposes. So, for example, if I know your purpose, at least I can get a very pretty good assumption about what you want, and that is aligned with my purpose. Maybe not entirely, but there is a good overlap.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you want. You know what I want. Then the only thing that requires trust between us is a good experience of integrity. So that means if I say something, I will do it. You can rely on me. If there is no integrity, you can say, well, Vlad has good intent, but he's not capable to execute on that intent. So there will be no trust in me. And that integrity is constantly tested, and we need to act with integrity all the time. That's another understanding that people need to gain, is what integrity is, and it needs to be crystal clear. And also maintaining integrity at all time is super hard. We all make mistakes. We all make our missteps. We need to know how to recover, and we need to know how to communicate, that, improvement that we make to maintain the integrity. So kind of those two things, I would say, the integrity and the purposes.
Wow, that's so powerful. And I'm glad what you said about the alignment of purpose plus the experience of integrity. A lot of our listeners know I have a new book coming out very soon called Trust-Based Policing. And the idea behind trust-based policing is that, and it's a simple KPI, key performance indicator, metric, standard, whatever term you want to use for it. And that is every time a law enforcement officer has an interaction with a citizen, did the law enforcement officer do everything in their power to have that citizen trust law enforcement just a little bit more? Law enforcement as a whole, including that officer, but as a whole. Now, we're not going to take somebody who hates cops and flip them 180 to loving cops in one encounter. It could happen, but generally speaking, that's not human nature. But can we do everything that's in our power to get someone to trust us a little bit more? Just a little bit. Yep. And so when you talk about alignment of purpose, what's the purpose of the citizen and the purpose of the law enforcement officer? And some people might say you're exactly opposite 180 because one's a criminal and one's a cop. But in reality, the alignment of purpose is, how is the officer going to treat the citizen? Because that's complete alignment. The law enforcement officer should be looking, I'm going to treat this person with dignity and respect. And the citizen is saying, hey, I want to be treated with dignity and respect. You can't get more aligned in purpose than that. And then the experience of integrity. That's what we demand of law enforcement officers, is to have a high level of integrity.
Absolutely.
And so both of those things that you talked about fit right in with the model of trust-based policing. So I love that on the corporate world, the business world side of things, we're having the same experience as what we want citizens and police officers, sheriff's deputies, to be able to have on the law enforcement side. And literally, whether that's a law enforcement officer, a K through 12 educator, a firefighter, a medical services provider, we're all looking for the same thing. We want to be able to trust people in those occupations as people who are in the public, receiving the public service of law enforcement, education, fire protection, and medical services. That's what we want, is that trust. Those are the people that we turn to in times of need. And so absolutely love that you brought that up. So thank you for that.
Yeah, great to hear about your book. I really appreciate that, and I always admire the level of standards for the police in the United States. No matter what kind of bad stories people show on social media, it is always for me much higher standards rather than in other countries. And being an immigrant, believe me, I have a comparison point, and I was really pleasantly surprised by the way how law enforcement officers demonstrate the alignment of the purposes. I will give you one example. One time I went from a gym to home. I drove my car, and it was a very bad weather. And on one of the crossroads, I saw a car with the alarm lights, and it was a pouring rain, and there was a police car staying behind that, and the police officer was out. I think that was a lady in the car, and the police officer was looking something under the car. It looks like this car got broke or something, and the police officer was looking under the car to try to understand what's going on with this car and what's the problem with that. I would say it will never happen in Russia. Never. I have never seen something like police officers trying to help a driver to fix cars. It's just ridiculous there, you know. It would be completely out of any logic. Nobody expects that. But here I'm thinking like, oh, police officer being a human, having human interaction with someone, and not after his job, but after helping people. So it's absolutely great, and I'm excited that you have your book out soon, and that will contribute to high standards, I believe, not only law enforcement, but everybody else who read the book. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for, because I've heard bits and pieces of your story, our listeners haven't had the chance. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be in the United States. What is your immigration story?
Yeah, well, that is, they call it luck, but also part of it is preparation. You know that the luck is when the opportunity meets the preparation. So I always wanted to be in a country which appreciates the property and protects the property of people. And since I was in the software development industry, I realized that staying in Russia and being a software developer in Russia is not that beneficial, because the property rights are not protected very well. And therefore, I wanted to be in a country that appreciates property rights. And I believe that the United States is the country which demonstrates that the best, and has the growing industry of software development. And I just looked for different opportunities and came to Minnesota in 2006, and came to work here as a contractor first and consultant, and then I I immigrated, so I was looking to stay here. It's kind of like a short story, but we don't have a lot of time. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate that. Gosh, we're almost near the end. There's so many questions to ask you. Let me ask you this. Why don't most people practice communication and influence skills? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that many people just take it as an extension of their life experience, being able to negotiate. And many people may believe they're pretty good at that, and they get what they want essentially. And once I asked a group of managers on one of the meetings, and I asked them, which of the teams, which of you would like to have an agile coach? And most of them answered, we are good already. We used to be not really good, but now we're doing fine. We don't need an agile coach. We're good enough. And of course, they're all right. They have a reason to say that. However, um, it is about your goal essentially. Do you want to be average at certain things? Do you want to have average deals? Do you want to live without significant challenge? You want to just keep going, and that's good enough for you? Or you want to set a higher goals in front of yourself. You want to achieve more. You want to improve and grow. And from this perspective, the people who are setting higher goals, let's say Michael Phelps, he's a champion in swimming, and he is champion for many years and took many gold medals. I can't imagine that he doesn't have a coach. I can't imagine that he is saying like, okay, I got gold medal, now I'm good. I don't need to train anymore. I just go to every competition and get the gold. That's not the case. So the people who strive for success, they need to be always ready. They need to be always sharp. They always want to make people more around them more engaged and more supportive. They always want to make better deals. They also want to go faster and overcome difficulties. And they are willing to crash and burn and learn. And they just want more from life in general. But, others probably just settle with what they have. And maybe they just don't put enough importance to the ability to communicate and to ability to make good agreements with others, and maybe it's not a priority.
I think sometimes it's not a priority. I think there's also a fear factor in the fact that if I'm working with a coach, I'm going to have to step out of my comfort zone. I'm going to have to put some work into it. If I don't work with a coach, I get to coast along, and that's always puzzled me because I've had multiple coaches in my lifetime in different areas. I mean, all the way back to, gosh, I remember seventh grade when I first started running track and I was running cross country, and I had a coach who, if it hadn't been for him, I probably would have died after the first mile on a 3-mile course. So yeah, having the coach, it's ironic that some people would turn that down, but I know there's different reasons, but it makes sense. So what would you recommend as a coach, not just a coach, but an agile culture coach? What would you recommend to people who really want to grow their persuasion and negotiation skills?
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent question. So the people who are just starting and people who do not know how to make a first step, what they usually do, they usually read a book, or maybe they watch a video masterclass, and maybe they feel excited about using those tools. But the thing is, without practice, that knowledge fades away, and rather quickly, so it doesn't stick. I would recommend, besides reading books and taking classes and watching videos, join practice sessions and practice in a friendly, low-key environment, when where stakes are low first, and then get the feedback. Practice every day and have someone guide you, and give you that feedback that your family and friends would not be able to give you, because they would never give you an adequate feedback. They will only give you feedback from their perspective, which is uneducated perspective. Find somebody who is like a step further than you and get their feedback. And that could be your fellow practitioners. So join the negotiation practice community, join the free sessions that we have, and try out what you learned. Try to talk to people and use those tools to get feedback from them.
Very cool. Great advice. We're, again, for the people listening to this, maybe you're driving, working out, whatever you're doing, just come back to the show notes. And in the show notes, we're going to have a couple of really important things. Number one, how you can find and join the negotiation practice community, how to keep in touch with Vladimir, and specifically joining his LinkedIn group, the Facebook group of in the negotiation practice community group on Slack, the Slack app. And there's lots of different ways you'll be able to keep in touch with Vladimir. And as we wind this episode down, Vladimir, thank you so very much for being here. I truly am honored by the time and effort and just your big heart and what you do every day and improving people's lives, because the stuff that they do to improve at work, they get to take those same skills home with them for their families. And that just makes them a more well-rounded, better person in this world. So thank you for making this world a better place. And before we close up, I want to ask you if there's any last thoughts or things that you'd like to share.
I would thank you so much for your kind words. I really appreciate that. And I feel the same. I feel so grateful that you invited me here. It's been a great conversation, and I like your thoughtful questions and what you do. I appreciate what you do, and I think that what the comment I want to make is I'm so happy to see that the professionals from different areas, including law enforcement, and specifically law enforcement professionals, are looking to improve their communication skills. It is super important, understanding the psychology and applying that, practicing that. And also, we were talking about alignment. Alignment essentially could be done on different standards. So I'm learning more about this, understanding it better, and improving and then passing that knowledge to others is super important. So thank you so much for doing that, and thank you for your podcast as well. I think it's very important.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for helping make it even better, Vladimir. Thank you so much for being here, listeners. Make sure that you look for a new episode of De-Escalation Conversations every Monday morning at 6 a.m. Pacific. And make sure that you please subscribe if you're watching this on the YouTube channels. If you're looking at Facebook or any of the social media channels, do me a favor and hit that like button. And Also, if there's a notification bell, click on that. Make sure that you get notified every time a new episode drops. Check us out at theidea.world, the International De-Escalation Association. There's tons of tools and resources available to you at free or low cost for you to be able to de-escalate tense situations and also just to make your lives a little bit better. Until next time, as always, stay safe.